Alright, thank you very much. Hello everybody, it's your good friend Pozzible here, and I'm back in action with another movie review. And this time we're checking out The Raid Part 2. This is the sequel to, of course, the first movie, The Raid, which came out 3 years ago. Now the first Raid was a revelation. You know, The Raid Redemption was an awesome movie, one of the best martial arts movies made in a long time. It was gritty, it was down to earth, it was still very entertaining, a very simple plot. As a matter of fact, the plot so good that they even, quote unquote, either remade, stole, begged, borrowed, steal, or borrow the plot when they made the movie Dread. The remake of Dread followed a similar plot to this, down to the whole, there's a drug lab in the middle of the building, and, they raid it all of a sudden. That's their redemption, I guess. But the first one was just awesome. Fist pounding, not too long, not overbloated, and yet great action. And it was just over 90 minutes long. So, it's 101 minutes is what they say on IMDb, is how long this movie was. Quick and to the point, very easy to follow, very easy to enjoy. You get your cops dressed in cop uniforms, you have the thugs dressed up in, just basically, it's early morning, so of course the thugs were still asleep at the time, so they didn't have time to get dressed or anything. But I cannot say how much I enjoyed this movie. Now, The Raid 2, yeah, The Raid 2. 2.5 hours of trying to... It should have been... There's another name for it, and I cannot pronounce that word, so I'm not going to try to pronounce it. It really should have been called Raid 2 Undercover, because that's what this is about. He goes undercover. He wants to bring down the crime syndicates because he got all these information on all the dirty cops. If you remember the end of their first raid, it starts with the box of tapes, right? Well, this movie picks up exactly where it leaves off. And, he's giving the tapes to this one guy hoping justice will be done. Justice was meant to be done, but it wasn't meant to be done in the way that he expected. And now he has to go undercover. And something that was supposed to just take a few months wound up actually taking a few years. And this is where it gets complicated, because ultimately, just to give you a little spoiler, his job was to infiltrate this crime organization so he can get the list of cops who are on the payroll during, and so he can help weed out the corruption in his city. That said, it is something he never does. Don't get me wrong, justice is served, but not in the way that it was intended from the very beginning. The action builds up, but the one problem with The Raid 2 is that it is just too overloaded. Too much stuff, too much plot, too much quote-unquote acting, too much scenes that were just unnecessary. Remember, this thing was almost 2.5 hours, and they could have easily have cut 30 minutes, if not more, out of this movie, and it would still have the same effect, because a lot of what they show just didn't matter. It just didn't mesh. I get that they see he makes friends with the boss's son, and that's how he gets in on the family organization. He's meant to protect the son, even though there's a lot of backstabbing going along, a lot of dirty dealings, and yes, a lot of assassins, well-trained assassins, and you see majority of them on the screen there. There's one person who's like deaf, and there's another person who's uses all these funky weapons. One thing I do want to address about this movie that I think people might complain about, I know this was kind of my concern while I was watching it, was not enough guns. It's like you're in the middle of a city. These guys are your bodyguards, and they don't carry guns. They carry these knives. You couldn't arm them better or anything. Understood, though. Let's face it. At a meeting between mob bosses, you're not gonna allow guns in there, because they could just go off and people could just start killing each other. You want to keep it safe. In public, I don't know where they were. I'm not sure what the laws were there, but apparently the knives were not as effective as they wanted it to be. That said, it was all part of making sure this is a martial arts movie, not a shoot-'em-up movie, even though there is some gunplay involved. And there are some twists involved, but it just takes too long to get there. One thing I do want to mention also, the character, the actor who played Mad Dog in the first one. I will not butcher his name here because I cannot pronounce it. But that said, he is back for this one, but he is not the same character. He is just one of the assassins who has the best scenes. I mean, this time he actually stole the movie, this guy did. He plays kind of a broken man, kind of a torn man, but at the same time, he plays a guy who is an assassin and is very good at what he does, despite the fact that he hates it and what it has done to his life. He's only in it like 2, maybe 3 times, but it wasn't enough. He had the best scenes, and he had some really good moments. It was good to see him act and to see him really come out and play a totally different character than what he played last time. Not what I was expected. Very pleased with his performance. This could have been a very good movie, and I have to admit, this movie, the ending climax, all worth it. Almost all worth it. The way it ended was great. It ended with the fight scene you always wanted, and it ended with the way it was supposed to. That said, though, the Raid 2 unfortunately has earned a pass from me. I don't recommend this, even for the fans of the first Raid. It just didn't have the magic. It took too long for things to happen. At some point, you were even confused as to who was who and what was what and what was going on a little bit. And there were times when they were doing things that they just never got back to it. There was this time when he was following somebody. He filmed them. He took pictures. He listened in on their conversation. And he did nothing with it. He was sent in to do one job, get the list of names, and he never did it. Something else happened. But it just took too long to make it happen. And it was just too much stuff going on. Not as well organized as it should have been. And despite the good moments, they just couldn't save it, unfortunately. This is one of the problems that I sometimes have with movies. Watching the independent movies. When you start off and you got a limited budget and you don't have a lot of resources, you got to take the bare minimum of what you can do. And when it succeeds, when it takes off, and you get this humongous explosion of possibility now, resources, you just can't play with it because now you got too much stuff, and that's the real problem with the Raid Redemption. It was too much stuff. All right, guys, that's it for me today. We'll see you at the theaters.